Hi again. So we now will start with the last part of this day, and this is the panel discussion. I'm really looking forward to that because it's a topic that I'm personally dealing a lot with. So the topic for today is safety validation, the path to homologation. And we invited a lot of industry-leading experts to discuss with us, and it's pretty cool that all of these appeared. And you're already there. I'm now seeing you on the screen. Welcome, everybody. I will introduce a little bit on what is the topic today, so where we are dealing with and why we are talking about this thing. So in general, the validation of the product safety of an autonomous system, maybe a car, a truck, or whatever, is a huge challenge because there are so many situations in which the car or the truck has to interact properly. So the product safety is not easy to assure. And there are a lot of different challenges that come together. There are things that has to be interacted with each other that was completely separated from each other in the past, and now interacting, like safety and security and SOTIF and all that things. And today we want to discuss on what are these challenges and how different companies interact with each other to solve these challenges or to provide solutions for that. And it would be a pleasure if all of you could shortly introduce yourself. Maybe Mr. Hellberg, you could start with that.
Yeah, for sure. Hello, Klaus Hellberg, my name, from MAN Truck and Bus. I'm since 20 years in the truck business in several areas in the development, and today I'm responsible for verification and validation in the electronic area.
Thank you very much. Manaswini, maybe you can go forward.
Hi everyone, I'm Manaswini Rath. I'm responsible for the ADAS and autonomous business at KPIT. With my 25 years of experience and long enough in ADAS, and from the beginning of 2004 and 5 associated with ISO 26262 also. So looking forward to the discussion of validation, which is one of my favorite too.
Thank you. Mr. Nijmerk, maybe you can continue.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much first for introducing myself. So I'm from the T-System. So T-System is one of these, the daughter company of Deutsche Telekom, so the biggest telecommunication provider. But our business is the connected mobility, and especially myself, I'm related in the business development of autonomous driving and meeting the challenges, so how to combine the data flows, data-driven development, etc., into a service-oriented platforms to provide this one as a current challenge as we serve for the automotive industries. Yeah, so there's from the background, I have an experience of 25 years plus in the automotive engineering.
Thank you very much. Hans-Jürgen, maybe you can continue.
Yeah, thank you, Jan-Ewe. And again, thank you very much for the invitation in this panel here. I'm very happy to be here. I'm Hans-Jürgen Holberg. I'm the Chief Sales Officer of BTC Embedded Systems, one of the two managers of our corporation. I'm responsible for marketing, sales, and support since many years. I'm more than 20 years active in the embedded domain, including formal methods, automatic testing, and things like that. Also, I studied in this area. And 20 years ago, I started with a company called OSC. Now it's called BTC Embedded Systems. So I was the first employee there. We are a two-vendor active worldwide in the US and in Asia and Europe. We have the current focus is the component testing for automotive applications, and also especially we have a certified tool chain in this area, very successful for automatic test generation. We are a strategic partner since more than a decade of dSPACE, with TargetLink as a code generator. And for today, we are active more than 3 years in the area of scenario-based testing of ADAS and AD domain. And we are closely working together with MAN Truck and Bus and dSPACE since the last 3-4 years to complete the solution in the direction of homologation of level 4 on the German Autobahn. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans-Jürgen. Simon, would be a pleasure if you can continue.
Yeah, hello. It's also a great pleasure for me to be here. I represent TÜV Süd, and in TÜV Süd's mobility division, we have a dedicated team for highly automated driving. We have 4 parts: testing, simulation, cybersecurity, and functional safety. Functional safety and SOTIF, and I represent there this functional safety and SOTIF part as a lead engineer for this topic.
And last but definitely not least, Tino.
Yeah, thanks, Jan. So welcome everybody also from my side. My name is Tino Schulze. I'm heading the business unit here at dSPACE for autonomous driving and software solutions. So we are compromising the different software tools such as TargetLink, ASM Automation Desk, and others here at dSPACE. And I have a working experience with dSPACE since 2003, mainly in the domains of simulation in different areas, HRL topics, and since 2019, I'm responsible here for the new build business unit.
Thank you. So what we definitely see is that here are a lot of companies at the table that have different expertises to offer. And I would really like to hear from the OEM perspective, what are the key challenges that has to be addressed? And then we see how these different companies could address this challenge. And even if they might, or they might need to interact with each other or collaborate with each other in a way that was not imaginable in the past. But to the audience, if you have any questions during the panel, following the discussion, just feel free to ask them via Slido again. Just use the hashtag DSD21. Okay, Mr. Hellberg, would be really great if you could just give us an overview. What is, from an OEM perspective, the current challenge? So you are in the end the responsible to release the truck in this case, or the autonomous system to the street. And it would be really great to see what is your pain currently.
Okay, thank you for the question and the invitation. The discussion is named also Path to Homologation. So we are thinking a lot about how to homologate. And if you think how a type approval today happens or in the past, then it was focused on vehicle side. So we had to select some, if you think about brakes or functions like this, we had to select vehicles out of our portfolio. We were discussing with the authorities, and then we had tests on the test tracks, and then we got a type approval. This changed the first time a bit with CO2 legislation, because there is already simulation involved. So it's not only on test tracks, there we have really to measure efficiency maps on test benches. We have to certify these maps together with the authorities and to encrypt these data that we can't change it. And then we have to simulate in a vector tool, which is developed by the European Union. And it's the same tool for every OEM. And this is then the basis for the certification. And if we now look forward to the certification of autonomous functions and vehicles, we will have several tools during the whole development process, which are involved to ensure that these systems fulfill really the requirements. And so the question for me is, or one of a lot of questions for me is, how we can ensure that on the one hand, we have a safe certification and type approval process, and on the other hand, how we can remain the flexibility to bring adapted functionalities very fast in our vehicles. Also regarding automation, if we think about something changes in the ODD, the environment changes, there are new vehicles on the road or something like this, then we have to change, we have to re-simulate and to certificate this, to improve this very fast. And this is one big topic we are thinking about.
Mm-hmm. So it's from the vehicle and then again to the back end, and then verifying again all the functions, deploying it again on the vehicle, and in between there is some kind of homologation process with it, which is completely manual currently, but has to be automated. So it's in the end some kind of digitalization of the homologation thing. Maybe this is something where we could directly ask the technical service. Simon, what is your take on that? So Mr. Hellberg really clearly described what he's looking for. What is your answer to that?
Yeah, so if you look at the newest regulations for highly automated driving, this is the ILKS regulation, the R157, then you see that, as Mr. Hellberg mentions, there are different approaches that you need to take. And for us as a technical service, we want to look for the final argument that the product is safe. So something like a safety case. So we would like to investigate on the argument that some company presents that this product is safe. And as we know, these systems, these automated driving systems have become very high complex. And that, of course, also increases the effort for the technical service to check, but not on scale. So the coverage, in quotation marks, that the technical service can provide in testing the full range of this functionality will decrease. And so we have several pillars like audits, process checks that we put together to get a full picture whether something is safe. So we will have to rely on this main argument provided by the OEM, why the product is safe. And then we can spot check different parts. And the regulation gives us some guidance how to do that, and gives us also quite some freedom for the technical service to extend that range in a scale that the technical service thinks is reasonable. And this makes it not easier. So it's not easy for the OEM, and it's not easy for us as a technical service to fill that freedom.
So that also means that you need additional know-how as a technical service. For example, with regard to simulation or with regard to IT infrastructures, is this something where you say, okay, that is, among other things, why we have to collaborate or in the end discuss with companies like dSPACE or like T-Systems or like BTC?
Yes, agreed. So if you look at the common regulations, you have a pretty clear statement what you need to do as a technical service. And now we have to fill this freedom, as I mentioned. And we, as a technical service, of course, don't have the manpower and all the detail know-how about how to build autonomous cars. So if we want to set up a reasonable process of checking these things, test catalogs that make sense, we need input from those who do the testing, do the tooling, and those who really do the cars. Otherwise, we might end up with something which is not realistic, or it's just testing in the wrong spot. And that will, of course, make us fail, because we want to ensure safety for public. And this mission, of course, we can only fulfill if we look at the right spots. And that will also be needed so that it is a fair competition, that really we check, give the same challenge for everyone, for every OEM that wants to put their car on the road or truck on the road.
We already got some questions regarding the discussion. I guess we have several aspects already touched, but one thing is with regard to, you mentioned the ALKS regulation, and the question is, how are the standards and regulations are currently evolving?
Yeah, so what we see in the LKS is that it goes away from a clear statement, this is what you need to check. And of course, there is some basic scenarios that you should check, but it gives you this freedom of doing something beyond. So there's this freedom beyond. And there's not only testing, there's a simulation option, there's the audit option. So it builds up several pillars that shall ensure that the overall product is safe. And we expect actually that this process is going to continue. So as I mentioned, things are getting more complex. So the coverage of actual testing of this full complexity of the functionality will decrease. So we will have to set up this check procedure more clever, and putting it on several pillars is one approach. And the other one is this flexibility. We've seen it in the past that if there's a very fixed test catalog, then you might design your system for that catalog, and then you can pass this particular challenge, but that doesn't mean that you're safe on the road. And so I guess this flexibility will remain, because legislators want to prevent that things are designed for only the test case. And I think that this multi-pillar approach of audits, document checks, testing, simulation, that will also remain, because otherwise we cannot cope with this complexity.
That's understood, yeah. So that means the complete process, the complete development process counts for the homologation. Manaswini, you are involved in a lot of different projects along the complete development process. What is your take on that? Is this, what implications has that on KPIT?
Yeah, thanks. I think I'll pick a few words that Simon used and explain how an engineering solution provider becomes one of the key ecosystem partner in this whole virtual simulation and homologation. So one of that he's been telling is scale. So this needs a scale in terms of infrastructure, as well as scale in terms of the scenarios, like all the coverage of the corner cases, the safety cases, and all the road conditions, traffic conditions, and all. So as an engineering solution provider, we bring this scale of domain experienced engineers who really execute this simulation and do the validation using all the tools and infrastructure provided by all the panelists and the companies here, right? So what it needs, again, leads to another point that Simon also brought, is to validate the autonomous system, you must know how the autonomous system has been built. And that is extremely important point, because our engineers develop the autonomous system. We are part of the developer of all the feature function that makes autonomous driving a piece of software which drives the car. You have to understand that extremely well to create the strategy to create simulation scenarios, create the strategy for the testing and creating the test cases. So that's where, along with the infrastructure and regulation and specification, it is also important that the domain experienced engineers who are building the autonomous system also be involved in creating the scenarios, doing the simulation, and writing the test cases to do the entire end-to-end validation. And that's where we have been engaged and bring value in this whole value chain.
That's completely understood. So the different things during the development are interacting more with each other, and now you are bringing in your expertise from the development also in the validation thing. For dSPACE, has this some implications, I would say, because the tool chain has to be adapted to that. Tino, what is your claim on that?
Yeah, that's also totally right from my perspective. When I look to development departments with which I was engaged with, there is typically a separation in terms of here's the function development, there's the testing. The testing is somehow split into software in loop testing and hardware in loop testing. Particularly, those things are going together in companies at tier ones or OEMs. But when we are looking to this whole story from the homologation back to the design of the software, then I guess the seamless transition of the tooling is very important. And from my experience, this is not only about the tooling. So we have seen all the work that has been done here internally with Simfera. So this is why we put this up, and also the work that we are doing with the partners here. But for me, one aspect is also very important when we are talking about doing more into simulation is where to get the device under test from. So this is for my experience, a very important topic. And it's not only about technical topics, it's also about having this as a clear target in the organization, that not only the pure hardware is designed with the software, but also software pieces in terms of, we call this virtual ECUs, or the software component needs to be tested. This is already available very early in the process to be put into such a validation and simulation loop, so that this continuous testing and the preparation towards the later homologation can really be done. And that's one of the crucial parts I see. And then such a seamless tool chain can really benefit the whole process.
Mm-hmm. The one thing is having the tool chain, having all the things in place to execute the test. But another thing is, and that there's a question that completely fits into that, is how's my test coverage? So the question is, how can we assess that the coverage of test situations is good enough? For example, not biased by a test generator and containing blind spots of underrepresented situations. We had these kind of questions earlier, and we bring this up again because yeah, for the homologation, we need to be sure that we are safe. What is your take on that, Hans-Jürgen?
Yeah, I guess that's one of the key points today, the coverage. Yeah. I mean, for me, it's like a paradigm shift regarding testing. We had a lot of experience in requirements-based testing, and we see for this kind of problem, we have to move to scenario-based testing. But if we look at scenario-based testing in a classical way, we are talking about very concrete scenarios which you want to test. And there we are talking about thousands, maybe millions of combinations of scenarios which you have to cover. And it's very difficult to define a coverage criteria which is finally needed for the homologation part. So BTC has introduced, together with the dSPACE and MAN, a kind of paradigm shift for the definition of scenarios. So we call this the abstract scenario definition. So we introduced a graphical language which is open scenario compatible, which allows our customers to define a set of abstract scenarios which should be taken into account and which should be covered in the direction of homologation finally, based on a given ODD. And there we are talking about, let's say, level 4 for the German Autobahn. That's what we discussed with MAN. We are not talking about millions of scenarios. We are maybe talking about hundreds or several hundreds of scenarios only. And this is something which can be discussed also with authority organizations like the TÜV, if we are complete in the sense of these kind of scenarios. And then definitely it's needed that we have a clear definition of what kind of concrete test cases we have to derive from that abstract scenarios. And we introduced a technology which is two-stage technology to create scenarios automatically from those abstract scenarios, which you can define graphically. And definitely it is not enough. We found a good way of combining the different parameters of the ODD in a statistical way, and we can discuss this statistical number with external authority organization or even the government. But finally, it is important to stress the system under test, which is the ego car. That means the algorithm itself, which we cannot control. And that means during any virtual simulation or real simulation, we have to judge if the system is stressed in a critical situation. So that means the customer must be able to define a so-called weakness function. And our technology is able, it's a kind of AI technology which observes the simulations and checks if the weakness function is taken into account. And this information is getting back into the scenario generation from the abstract scenarios. And this definitely stresses the system in the critical area. So if we take, let's say, recorded scenarios from the street, for example, for a truck, in 95% of the cases, you drive in one direction, that's all. So we have to focus on the real interesting scenarios, and that's very important. And finally, it is important to analyze if the scenarios which you simulate are completely simulated in the way you have specified abstractly. And that means because of the ego car and the physics, it's possible that our simulations must be reactive. That means we generate a so-called reactive traffic controller, which comes together with a test case. And that shows us in the loop that this is capable. And together with the dSPACE environment, we see a good chance that the final solution we want to develop together is able to enable the homologation for our customers.
It's interesting. So it's about having the right scenarios, having the coverage in place. But I would assume that there are a lot of scenarios that has to be tested to identify the critical path. And this is something where we need a scalable solution or a scalable IT infrastructure. And giving that fact and the additional one that Mr. Hellberg mentioned, that we need some kind of digital loop between the car and the back end and the verification and validation pipeline. This is something where we need to also integrate the IT infrastructure providers or the engineering solution providers in that sense. Mr. Nymerk, what is your take on that?
Well, thank you very much. So just first of all, referring to those what Mr. Hellberg is saying, so the path of validation and homologation, so which is also the theme of this panel discussion. I observe it more, it is also under the line, it is a path of how the data flow and the software flow could be improved. In terms of all what the other panelists like Manasvini and Hans Holberg are saying, this is in terms of how could this process be fully automated in terms of a DevOps process, just in order to fulfill the requirement that the homologation, the validation, the verification will not take longer than let us say a couple of hours or days. Currently, it's a much more longer process of months and more. So therefore, what is our take? Our take is as a software of an infrastructure provider, it's our take that we also understand us as an integrator, as a system integrator, which are able to provide and to fulfill all these data flows on the platform, on the scalable platform, combining this one with edge computing aspects, simulations, paths, etc. So it has to be continuous and it has to be fully automated. And this is a challenge from the IT perspective. It's a very, very much a challenge. Yeah? And referring to your questions, Yaniv, if we take this as a loop, so saying the car itself is currently, or it's running to an edge device. And we have to understand this one as an edge device. So where a lot of data will be created and will be observed by the sensors like LiDAR, camera, etc. And then this data, as well as a shared software, which is placed into the embedded software functionalities, and also where they're running the compute devices on these cars, and I'm not taking, will not say something about power consumption, etc. This one has to be combined into a fusion model to be analyzed against anomalies, just in order to reduce the data that has to be transferred to the backend. So this is one of the major challenges which we also face currently, taking also into account that the current transport it has to be run via LTE and 5G in the future. And therefore we have to transport all this algorithm and all these ideas, which is on the RID path, into the cars. And then the next challenge will be the ingest process into the backends. I will take it not in the single form, in the more multiple forms, just running not only one data lake, so running multiple data lakes, just in order to run the continuous processes, and then combining all these aspects of training, validations, resimulation, and then to transport the retrained and reprocessed and fixed model via an over-the-air update process into the car. So in this cycle process, which you call the digital loop, this has to be run in a very fast way, so nearest in real time and future. And taking this one into a vision, this will be much more challenging. And of course, we are not able to fulfill this one alone. So we have to collaborate with a lot of companies. So like all those what we see here in the panel.
Mm-hmm. So maybe just quick questions to all of you. So in the end, we see, okay, that seems to be really complex and different aspects come together. In the end, we already were at some kind of DevOps-like processes, including the car, including the backend. So seems to be really complicated. But in the end, it's about the safety of the system. So how could I really say, when did I have tested enough? And I guess this is not really easy to answer, but maybe to you, Simon, how could I trust this complex process? How could I trust all these different aspects that come together here? Is this possible by having this collaboration between these companies that we see here?
Yeah, actually, I think it's possible. Of course, we cannot exclude with 100% everything. So you see it also in the SOTIF approaches that you have. People are talking about risk. So we have to push this limit below a certain risk. And this is also what Mr. Hellberg mentioned, that we have to be better than a human driver. And I think this is the big benchmark, being better than a human driver, maybe by a certain safety factor. And so if we are able to exclude that there is this needle in the haystack that makes it dangerous, that this needle in the haystack is rare or small, then I think we can handle it. We don't have to achieve full knowledge of everything. I mean, this will not be possible, but I think we will be able to establish some statistic arguments. For example, with all the data that T-Systems will collect on the street, and all this is, with the know-how from Mr. Holberg, from the scenario classifications, all this will come together in this argument that this residual risk will be small enough. And I think this is the path that we can go.
Okay. Mr. Hellberg, did you hear anything that helps? And are there specific things where you say, okay, this is something where we really have to focus on in the next month?
I heard a lot of things that help, and I think there are a lot of good ideas on the table. We heard from every domain, and I think the challenge or the next steps will be that we only together can manage this challenge. That was quite clear, I think, also on this panel discussion, that we need all stakeholders we have here on the panel and more maybe to bring all the steps and ideas together, and then it's manageable, I think. And I agree what Mr. Rösner just said, and we are on a good way, I think.
Thank you. Maybe Tino, into your direction. So if you see which kind of companies are here on the table, it's IT companies, it's technical services, engineering service providers. What changes for dSPACE in that regard? Because I would say this is something completely new for us, isn't it?
I mean, when I look onto dSPACE and what we provide over the last couple of decades in terms of simulation, I guess we already work together with companies in terms of engineering companies. We work together with BTC. I think the new aspect that comes along here is this close collaboration with the platform providers. This cloud and infrastructure technology plays a more important role that we have to work with in our tool environment. That's what we are doing. And on the other hand, this way towards homologation is something which is very important. This is why the collaboration with the TÜV and the authorities plays a more important role than from my experience in the past. And bringing this together as a whole setup, I guess, is only partly a question of, I would call it, selling tools or selling systems. It's to really place a solution and being more in the interaction with the customers and understand their needs and having it implemented in stepwise. Because I guess we know the big picture, but we have to do it step by step to really also introduce it into the company's organizations. And that's, I guess, also something that we are experiencing in several customer projects right now, that this understanding of the organization, understanding what is the best step first and what are the next steps then, this is something which we experience more than compared to the past, I guess. And this is what we are doing right now, also together with partners like we have it here on the panelists.
Maybe one last question to Manaswini. So I would assume that you as an engineering service provider with a lot of workforce that you have, a lot of engineers that are available, could you integrate this solution for an OEM like MAN or whomever and bring all these puzzle pieces together?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for asking that question, because the answer is in your question already. So we actually bring that integration partner. We are a system integrator in this case when it comes to virtual simulation and validation, where we are the kind of integrator who brings the infrastructure, helps in deployment, commissioning, then create the scenarios and execute the scenarios and provide the analytical test report so that it is valuable for the OEMs to see which feature is performing and not performing. We also power this whole execution by deep safety analysis, like complete chain of functional safety analysis from the safety goals to safety requirements, where we derive the safety scenarios and certify and so on and so forth. In addition to this, I think one of the critical things we have not discussed, I would like to bring, is the trustworthiness of this whole simulation and validation, meaning what are the key challenges that we are facing today? I mean, I think infrastructure, Tino talked, everybody talked, it is being solved by our colleagues. I mean, T-Systems, Microsoft and all that, but the key challenge still is the sensor model fidelity and the traffic model accuracy, right? So there has to be a lot of work done to improve the sensor model, the vehicle dynamics model, and so on and so forth. That is extremely critical and complex engineering. And we are working together even with tier ones who are the sensor developers to bring this more and more accuracy into the whole tool chain. And that is one of the key critical part to be considered right now. So yes, we are the integrator, and these are few engineering complexity that has to be solved. We are working on it and bringing to the table.
Thank you. So I would summarize, okay, it's definitely complex. A lot of different aspects has to come together here. But what we can assume is that dSPACE with its partner network could be a valid player in that regard. So that holds for KPIT, that holds for T-Systems, for the TÜV Süd, of course, and also, of course, for BTC. So we would really like to go into more detailed discussion also with the audience here in the event. And if this is possible, just bring us your ideas, just bring us your challenges, and we will do everything to connect the dots in this big challenge. And yeah, thank you to the panel discussionists. So really great to discuss with you. I would assume it was not the last time we discussed. And yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time, and we see us soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to the panelists.
Okay. Yeah, it's a little bit. Now it's the end of the event. So we discussed a lot. We heard a lot of challenges that we have to overcome. But my personal take is that we heard a lot of solutions that are already in place. Maybe with regard to dSPACE, of course, we saw a lot of new solutions that we are offering, an end-to-end data-driven development process, and a complete new testing, validation, and simulation toolchain that will be in place this year. And with our technology partners that you saw here, I would say we are definitely well in shape to address these challenges. So do not hesitate to contact us with any problem that you have, and I'm pretty convinced that we will solve this problem for you. So the event will continue in the exhibition. There are the experts, even the experts that you currently that you saw on the panel, so you can go into direct discussion with them, and I would really invite you to do so. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and see you soon. Bye.